He had always loved music. From the moment he could remember, the sound of melodies and rhythms made him feel alive. Even as a child, he would hum songs while walking down the narrow streets of his neighborhood, and sometimes he would tap on anything that could make a sound. Old tin cans, wooden boxes, even the empty plastic bottles he found along the road became his instruments. Music was his escape, his joy, and the one thing that made him feel free in a world that often felt heavy and hard. He lived in a small town where dreams were often quietly buried under the weight of reality. People there believed that life had to follow a certain path: school, work, family, repeat. There was little room for chasing something different, something daring. Music was seen as a hobby at best, not a career. And if anyone tried to push boundaries or express themselves too loudly, they were often silenced. He knew this, yet he could not stop. The sound of music ran in his veins, and it called him, no matter the risk. He spent countless hours practicing. His small room, which overlooked the dusty street below, was filled with instruments collected from various places. Some were gifts, others were second-hand treasures found at the local market. Every evening, after finishing his schoolwork and chores, he would sit by the window and play. At first, the neighbors would complain about the noise, but over time, some began to listen quietly, leaning from their doorways, curious about the passion in the music that poured from that little room. Despite his dedication, life was never easy. His parents struggled to make ends meet. His father worked long hours in a factory, and his mother cleaned houses in the neighborhood. They were proud of his talent, but they also worried. They had seen too many young people with dreams like his, dreams that never seemed to survive the harshness of reality. They feared that his love for music might lead to disappointment, and sometimes, their concern felt like a gentle weight pressing on his shoulders. Still, he could not let go of his dream. It had become a part of who he was. School was another challenge. Some teachers encouraged him when they saw his talent, but others dismissed him. They told him that music would not bring him stability, that he should focus on more practical subjects. He remembered one teacher in particular who told him, "You are wasting your time with this. Someday you'll understand that music is not for people like us." Those words hurt more than anything, but they also ignited a quiet fire inside him. He wanted to prove that passion and talent could speak louder than doubt and fear. One day, an announcement came at school about a local talent show. The winner would have a chance to perform at a big event in the city, where professionals and music lovers would watch. For him, this was an opportunity he could not miss. He spent days preparing, carefully selecting the pieces he would play, practicing until his fingers ached and his voice was hoarse. Music was not just a hobby anymore. It was a mission. He wanted to show the world what he could do, even if the world had already tried to silence him before. But as the day of the talent show approached, the resistance began. Some students whispered that he had no chance. Some teachers warned him to be realistic and not get his hopes up. And there were rumors that the organizers considered canceling his performance because they feared it would be too different, too bold, too loud for the quiet expectations of the town. He heard about these talks from friends who wanted to support him, but he also saw the worry in their eyes. Everyone seemed to want him to play it safe, to blend in, to not stand out. He felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The fear was natural. After all, rejection and ridicule were possibilities. But the excitement came from knowing that this could be his moment, the moment where all the hours of practice and dedication might finally be seen and heard. He reminded himself of why he played. It was not just for recognition or applause. It was for the pure joy of creating something beautiful, something that could touch hearts. On the morning of the talent show, he woke up early. He checked his instruments one more time, ensuring everything was in perfect condition. His hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from anticipation. He looked at himself in the mirror, trying to steady his mind. He whispered to himself, "This is my chance. I will play no matter what." When he arrived at the venue, he felt the weight of all eyes and whispers around him. The room was filled with students, parents, and local officials. The air was tense. He could hear some of the audience muttering doubts, some even laughing quietly, dismissing him before he had even begun. But he did not let that stop him. He carried his instruments to the small stage, each step firm with resolve. He could feel his heart beating in rhythm with the passion that had always driven him. As he prepared to start, a few organizers approached him. They warned him again in softer words this time, suggesting that he tone down his performance, that he play something more familiar, more acceptable. But he shook his head. He had come this far to be true to himself, and he could not compromise now. He looked out at the crowd, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes filled the room, soft at first, almost hesitant. But as he continued, the music grew stronger, more confident. It was unlike anything the audience had heard before. Every note carried emotion. Every melody spoke of struggle, hope, and determination. Some people leaned forward in surprise, their doubts slowly giving way to curiosity. Others whispered to their neighbors, trying to describe what they were hearing, as if words alone could capture the magic that poured from the young musician's hands and voice. Even in the early moments of his performance, he could feel a change in the room. The tension, the skepticism began to fade. People stopped murmuring and started listening. Their eyes followed his movements. Their ears hung on every note. Music had a way of breaking through barriers, and he could feel it happening. He was no longer just a student trying to perform. He was a storyteller, and his story was reaching everyone there. By the time he finished the first piece, there was a pause, a moment of silence that felt heavy with astonishment. No one had expected this. No one had thought that he could capture so much feeling and command attention so effortlessly. He smiled softly to himself, not from pride, but from the deep satisfaction of having shared something true and beautiful. He knew the journey had only just begun, and the real challenges were still ahead. But this moment proved to him that passion and dedication could make a difference. As he stepped off the stage, people came forward to congratulate him. Some of the skeptics nodded with respect, unable to hide their surprise. A few teachers admitted that they had underestimated him, and even some students who had mocked him earlier now asked questions about his music, curious to learn more. It was a small victory, but an important one. For the first time, he felt that his voice had truly been heard, and that despite the doubts and the attempts to silence him, he had made an impact. Walking home that evening, he reflected on everything that had led to this point. The long hours of practice, the obstacles, the warnings, the doubts. Everything had shaped him into the musician he was becoming. He realized that challenges would never disappear completely, but each time he faced them, he grew stronger, more confident, and more determined to follow his passion. Music had always been his companion, his escape, and now it had become his way of speaking to the world. That night, as he played quietly in his room once more, he felt a deep sense of peace. The notes floated through the air, filling the small space with warmth and light. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, and there would be moments when people tried to silence him again. But for now, he allowed himself to savor the feeling of having overcome the first real challenge, of having amazed an audience that had doubted him. It was a taste of what could come, a glimpse of the future that awaited those who dared to follow their hearts and refused to be silenced. After the talent show, the young musician thought that maybe, just maybe, people would start to take him seriously. The applause, the surprised faces, and the quiet admiration from some teachers had given him hope. But he quickly realized that the world outside that small stage was not ready to welcome someone who dared to dream differently. Some people still whispered behind his back. Some dismissed his success as a fluke, and a few even tried to prevent him from performing again. It was as if the brief moment of recognition had awakened others' desire to push him down. He returned to school the following week, hoping things might feel easier, but the resistance was palpable. Certain classmates avoided him not because they were jealous, but because they had been told to keep him in check. A few teachers continued to give advice that sounded like warnings rather than guidance, telling him to focus on academics and consider a more stable path. It was frustrating, but he knew he had to stay focused. Music was no longer a hobby. It was his calling, and he refused to let anyone dim the light he had just ignited. At home, his parents were both proud and worried. His mother cooked extra food as if to soothe the tension she saw in his face, while his father gave him long, thoughtful looks, silently measuring his dreams against the practical world. They tried to support him, but the fear of failure lingered in their eyes. He could feel it, and it hurt, yet it also reminded him of why he needed to succeed. Not just for himself, but to show his family that following one's heart could be worth it. Word spread quickly through the town about the talent show. Some people praised him openly, calling him talented and brave. Others doubted him, questioning whether he could continue performing at such a high level. He began receiving invitations to play at local gatherings, small festivals, and even private events, but each offer came with subtle warnings. Some organizers hinted that his style might be too unconventional, too bold, or too different from what the audience expected. It was a delicate balance. He wanted to perform, but he also wanted to remain true to his music, to let it speak freely. During this time, he met an older musician who had traveled to different cities and had seen the struggles of young artists firsthand. The man had kind eyes and a calm presence, and he listened patiently as the young musician shared his dreams and fears. "People will always try to tell you what you cannot do," he said, "but the only way to grow is to listen to your heart, practice relentlessly, and never let fear decide your future. Music has a power that words cannot match, but it only works if you believe in it fully." The advice resonated deeply. He began spending even more time with his instruments, exploring new sounds and experimenting with rhythms that felt true to him. He learned not just to play, but to feel the music from deep within. Every note, every beat, was an expression of his journey. The struggles, the doubts, the moments of joy, and the determination that refused to give up. He practiced in the early mornings, late nights, and even in the quiet hours when the town seemed asleep. Music had become his language, and the world, in its stubbornness, would simply have to listen. Yet the opposition continued. At one local event, he was scheduled to perform, but a few organizers tried to cancel his appearance at the last moment. They claimed the audience might not enjoy something so different, and there were murmurs that he should play something more traditional. The young musician felt anger and disappointment, but he also knew that confrontation would not help. Instead, he found ways to prepare quietly, making sure every note he played would be undeniable, every melody impossible to ignore. He would let the music speak for him, louder than words ever could. On the day of another performance, he arrived at the venue with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The hall was larger this time, filled with people who had come to see what the young musician could do. Some were curious, others skeptical, but he focused on the music, not the faces. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and began to play. The first notes were delicate, tentative, but as he continued, the sound grew stronger, weaving a story that captivated everyone present. People stopped talking, stopped moving, and simply listened. A few moments into his performance, he noticed that some of the skeptics in the crowd were shifting in their seats, unable to ignore the beauty and intensity of what they were hearing. The music carried emotions that transcended doubt and fear, connecting everyone in the room through a shared experience. Even the organizers who had tried to cancel his show looked on with surprise and a reluctant admiration. His talent was undeniable, and the audience could feel the sincerity in every note. After the performance, people approached him, offering compliments and expressing their amazement. Some had doubted him before, but now they were willing to listen, to understand the passion that had driven him to defy expectations. Still, there were challenges waiting outside the venue. Some parents whispered that his future was uncertain, while a few peers continued to gossip and undermine his efforts. It was a reminder that success was not always immediate or complete, and that obstacles often appeared even when things seemed to be going well. Determined to keep going, he began organizing small sessions to teach music to children in his neighborhood. He wanted to share what he had learned, to inspire others to follow their dreams even when the path seemed difficult. These sessions became a quiet sanctuary, a place where he could play freely and watch young minds light up with excitement and curiosity. Teaching also deepened his own understanding of music, as he realized that guiding others required patience, empathy, and a connection beyond technical skill. He also started experimenting with writing his own compositions, drawing from personal experiences and emotions. Some pieces were happy, reflecting moments of triumph and joy. Others were more somber, echoing the frustration and struggles he had faced. He poured everything into the music, the fear, the hope, the rebellion against those who doubted him. Each new piece became a personal statement, a declaration that he would not be silenced. Despite the progress, he knew the real test was still ahead. There would be bigger audiences, more critics, and greater challenges waiting in the city where professionals watched and judged every performance. The thought was both exciting and intimidating, but he reminded himself of what he had already accomplished. Standing up to doubt, facing attempts to silence him, and connecting with audiences through the sheer power of his music. These experiences gave him strength, courage, and the confidence to face whatever lay ahead. As months passed, his reputation grew quietly but steadily. More people began to attend his performances, curious to see the musician who had refused to be silenced. Invitations arrived from nearby towns and cultural centers, each offering an opportunity to expand his audience and challenge himself further. He accepted them cautiously, mindful of staying true to his style and voice. Every new performance was another chance to prove that passion and talent could overcome skepticism and fear. He also faced moments of self-doubt. There were nights when he questioned whether he could continue, whether the obstacles were too great, and whether people would ever truly accept him. But music had become more than a choice. It was his identity. He reminded himself that even when the world tried to silence him, he could still create, still express, and still reach hearts in ways that words alone could not. This realization carried him through the hardest days and fueled his determination to keep performing. One evening, after a small but successful show in a neighboring town, he walked home under the stars, carrying his instrument carefully in his hands. The cool night air felt refreshing, and he thought about how far he had come. The struggles, the doubts, and the resistance had shaped him, teaching patience, resilience, and the power of unwavering dedication. He knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt that the world might finally be listening. In his room, he played again, letting the music flow naturally, without fear of judgment or expectation. The melodies carried the story of his journey. The obstacles, the moments of doubt, the small victories, and the hope for what was still to come. Music had become his voice, his shield, and his way of connecting with a world that often tried to silence those who dared to dream differently. And as he played, he knew that no matter what challenges arose, he would never stop. He would continue to play, to inspire, and to prove that the courage to follow one's heart could transform even the most doubtful audience. As time passed, his music continued to draw attention, both positive and negative. People who had once doubted him began to speak of his talent with a mixture of surprise and admiration, while others still tried to discourage him, claiming that his style was too unconventional or that his dreams were unrealistic. He learned to ignore the negativity and focus on the power of his own music. He knew that every note he played, every melody he created, was a way of speaking his truth, and no one could take that away from him. A major opportunity arrived when a well-known cultural center in the city invited him to perform in front of a large audience. This was no small event. Professionals, critics, and music lovers from across the region would be attending. The invitation filled him with both excitement and fear. He understood that this was a chance to show that his talent went beyond local recognition. But it was also a challenge. The expectations were higher, and the risk of failure loomed larger than ever. In the days leading up to the performance, he practiced relentlessly. He experimented with new rhythms and melodies, pushing himself beyond what he thought was possible. He wanted every note to resonate, every beat to tell a story. Sleep became secondary to music, as his mind constantly replayed compositions, fine-tuning each piece until it felt perfect. His small room became a sanctuary of creativity, filled with the sound of instruments and the quiet hum of determination. Despite his focus, doubt crept in during quiet moments. He wondered if he would be able to impress such a discerning audience, if his music would be appreciated, or if he would be dismissed once again. These thoughts weighed heavily on him, but he remembered the advice of the older musician who had guided him earlier, to trust in the power of music and the sincerity of his own voice. With this in mind, he tried to channel all fear into energy, letting it fuel his preparation rather than paralyze him. On the day of the performance, the city felt different from his small town. The streets were busy, full of people rushing to work, shops, and cafes. The cultural center loomed ahead, grand and intimidating, its doors promising opportunity and challenge in equal measure. He carried his instrument carefully, each step echoing the rhythm of his heart. Entering the hall, he was struck by the size of the audience and the formal atmosphere. This was unlike any stage he had performed on before. But he reminded himself, music was universal, and if he played from his heart, the audience would feel it. Backstage, he noticed the presence of professional musicians, some of whom seemed critical, some encouraging. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to skepticism. The organizers gave last-minute instructions, urging performers to stick to a traditional style. Some suggested he simplify his pieces to appeal to the larger crowd. He listened politely, but inside he resolved to remain true to his unique style. His music was a reflection of his soul, not a formula to please others. When his turn came, he stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, and the audience seemed endless. A hush fell over the room as he lifted his instrument and prepared to play. For a moment he felt a flicker of fear, but then he reminded himself why he was there. He took a deep breath, let the air fill his lungs, and began. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, but as he continued, they grew in strength and emotion. Each melody carried a story, the struggles he had faced, the obstacles he had overcome, the hope that kept him moving forward. As he played, he noticed the audience shifting. Some leaned forward, captivated by the depth and sincerity of the music. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, free from judgment. Even the skeptical professionals began to nod, their expressions softening as they absorbed the raw talent before them. He felt a connection forming, invisible yet undeniable, a bridge built solely through the power of music. Midway through his performance, he made a small mistake, a slip of the fingers that could have thrown him off. But instead of panicking, he smiled inwardly and continued. The audience did not notice the error. They were too absorbed in the emotion of the performance. In that moment, he realized something profound. Music was not about perfection, but about expression. It was about feeling, connecting, and sharing a piece of oneself with the world. Every note mattered not for its technical accuracy alone, but for the truth it carried. The performance grew stronger as he played, each piece flowing into the next with a natural rhythm. He experimented with dynamics, alternating between soft, delicate passages and powerful, commanding bursts of sound. The audience responded in kind. Applause at unexpected moments, quiet anticipation, and finally, an overwhelming wave of appreciation that built as he neared the conclusion of his set. People were moved, some visibly so, by the sincerity and passion of his music. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, as if the audience collectively held its breath, taking in the final resonance. Then, the room erupted in applause, cheers, and shouts of approval. For the first time, he felt the magnitude of what he had achieved. He had faced doubt, opposition, and fear, and yet he had stood firm, allowing his music to speak. The joy that surged within him was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was a mixture of relief, triumph, and profound gratitude. After the performance, several people approached him with words of admiration. Some offered opportunities to perform in larger venues, others asked for guidance or collaboration. Even critics who had initially doubted him acknowledged the depth of his talent. It was a transformative moment, not just in terms of recognition, but in the understanding that perseverance, authenticity, and passion could break through barriers that once seemed insurmountable. Walking home that evening, he reflected on everything that had led to this point. The challenges, the late nights of practice, the resistance he had faced. They all felt like necessary steps in shaping the musician he had become. Each obstacle had strengthened his resolve. Each moment of doubt had deepened his understanding of himself and his music. And now, having performed for a sophisticated and critical audience, he felt ready to face even greater challenges, knowing that the truth of his art could withstand scrutiny and skepticism. He returned to his room that night and picked up his instrument once more. The familiar comfort of his small space surrounded him, and he let the music flow naturally, without concern for judgment or expectation. Every note, every chord, carried the experiences of the day, the anxiety, the courage, the connection with the audience, and the joy of sharing his voice. Music had become not just a passion, but a lifeline, a language through which he could communicate the depths of his heart and soul. As he played, he understood that the journey was far from over. There would be new audiences, bigger stages, and more challenges to face. There would be moments when people tried to silence him again, moments when doubts crept in or opportunities seemed uncertain. But he also knew that each performance, each note, was a step forward. The courage to stay true to himself, to embrace the power of his music, and to connect with others through authenticity and emotion would guide him through any obstacle. In the quiet hours of the night, he allowed himself a small, contented smile. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside his room, there was peace. He was a musician, a storyteller, and a dreamer, and he had begun to prove that passion and dedication could break through even the loudest doubts. The music was his voice, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew that voice would continue to be heard. The success of his city performance was a turning point, but it also brought new challenges. As more invitations arrived for him to perform, the pressure grew. Some events were larger, more formal, and filled with audiences who expected technical perfection and professional polish. Yet, he refused to compromise the authenticity of his music. Every time he stepped on stage, he poured his heart into every note, every rhythm, every pause, knowing that the true power of music lay in emotion, not just technique. He traveled to different towns, performing in community halls, outdoor festivals, and cultural centers. Each place presented unique challenges. In some towns, the audience was skeptical, their expressions closed and doubtful. In others, the crowd was warm and welcoming, clapping along, swaying to the melodies, and cheering loudly at the end of each piece. Regardless of the setting, he approached every performance with the same dedication, preparing meticulously and allowing his music to speak for itself. During one particularly large festival, he faced a critical audience that included well-known musicians and music critics. The hall was packed, and the atmosphere was tense. Some people had come with high expectations, others with doubts about what he could achieve. He felt the familiar knot of nerves in his stomach, but reminded himself that music had always been his voice. He closed his eyes for a moment, inhaled deeply, and began to play. The first notes were delicate, carefully measured, but as he continued, the music grew in strength and complexity. He experimented with dynamics, shifting from soft, intimate passages to bold, resonant bursts of sound. The audience began to lean forward, caught in the ebb and flow of his melodies. He could feel the room changing. The skepticism in the air was slowly replaced by attention, curiosity, and even awe. People who had doubted him were now listening, truly listening, as if the music had created a bridge between their hearts and his. He noticed subtle changes in the audience. A few people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others whispered softly to each other, unable to describe in words the impact of what they were hearing. Some of the critics who had arrived with skeptical expressions began nodding, their faces showing recognition of talent that could not be ignored. In that moment, he understood something profound. Music had the power to transform, to touch hearts, and to silence doubts without a single word. Midway through his performance, he encountered an unexpected technical difficulty. A string on his instrument broke, threatening to interrupt the flow of his set. Panic might have overtaken him, but years of practice, resilience, and determination came into play. He adapted quickly, improvising and weaving the mishap into his music. The audience never noticed the problem. They only felt the continued emotion and energy. That moment taught him an important lesson. The essence of music was not perfection, but the ability to connect, adapt, and continue despite obstacles. As the performance neared its climax, he played pieces that reflected his journey. The struggles, the doubts, the small victories, and the moments of joy. The audience was completely absorbed. Some wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the honesty and intensity of the music. Others clapped in rhythm, feeling the energy of each beat. He played with a sense of liberation, knowing that every note carried a piece of his story, and that the room was now sharing in that story with him. When the final notes faded into silence, there was a pause that felt eternal. Then, the hall erupted in applause, cheers, and standing ovations. People shouted encouragement and admiration, some even calling for encores. It was a moment of pure triumph, a culmination of years of hard work, struggle, and unwavering dedication. The young musician felt a surge of emotion. Relief, joy, and gratitude all mixed together. He had faced doubt, opposition, and fear, and he had emerged victorious, not just through skill, but through authenticity, passion, and courage. After the performance, several audience members approached him to express their admiration. Some offered opportunities to perform in even larger venues. Others wanted to collaborate or learn from him. He was humbled by the attention, but he also understood that recognition was not the ultimate goal. The true victory lay in the ability to connect with people, to touch hearts, and to inspire others to believe in their own dreams. He continued to travel and perform, sometimes alone, sometimes with other musicians he had met along the way. Each experience taught him something new, whether it was a technical skill, a new style of composition, or simply the joy of seeing someone moved by music. He remained humble, always remembering the small town where he had first faced doubt and opposition, the family who had supported him cautiously, and the teachers and friends who had believed in him when few others did. Teaching also became a significant part of his journey. He organized workshops and small classes for children and young adults, sharing not just techniques but the philosophy that had guided him. To play from the heart, to persevere, and to embrace challenges as opportunities for growth. Watching the next generation discover their own voices brought him immense satisfaction. He realized that his impact extended beyond the stage. It was in the inspiration he could provide, the courage he could instill, and the hope he could share. Despite the growing success, he never forgot the moments of resistance he had faced. The memory of teachers who dismissed him, organizers who doubted him, and peers who mocked him remained vivid. These experiences became a source of strength, a reminder of the importance of resilience. Each time he faced doubt or opposition, he drew on the lessons of his past, knowing that perseverance and authenticity were more powerful than fear and criticism. Through all of this, he also discovered a deeper understanding of himself. Music had always been his companion, his outlet, and his voice. Now it had become a lens through which he viewed life. A balance of challenges and triumphs, struggles and joy, fear and courage. He learned to embrace uncertainty, to accept mistakes as part of the journey, and to find beauty in every note, every pause, and every connection he created with his audience. The journey was far from over. Larger stages, bigger audiences, and greater challenges awaited. But he faced each new opportunity with confidence rooted in experience, resilience, and passion. He knew that no matter what obstacles arose, he had the ability to create, inspire, and connect through the universal language of music. One evening, after a long series of performances, he returned to his small room and played quietly, reflecting on the journey so far. The notes filled the space with warmth and light, carrying the story of his struggles, victories, and dreams. He smiled to himself, knowing that the journey of a musician was never truly about the applause, but about the courage to share one's voice, the determination to persevere, and the joy of connecting hearts through the power of music. As the night deepened, he allowed himself to imagine the future. New audiences waiting to be inspired, new melodies yet to be discovered, and new opportunities to touch lives through his art. He knew that the path would continue to have obstacles, but he also knew that music would always guide him, empower him, and allow him to speak a truth that could never be silenced. The applause of the past, the recognition of the present, and the hope for the future all intertwined, creating a melody of perseverance, courage, and passion that would carry him forward, no matter where the journey led. Over the months, the young musician's journey continued to unfold in ways he had never imagined. He had faced opposition, doubts, and moments of fear, yet he had persevered and let his music speak. Now, recognition had started to follow him more consistently. Invitations arrived from cities he had never visited, from festivals and cultural events where audiences eagerly awaited his performances. It was exciting, but it also reminded him of the responsibility he carried, to remain true to his music and to the passion that had guided him from the beginning. Despite the growing fame, he stayed grounded. He often reflected on his early days, practicing in a small room with makeshift instruments, feeling the raw connection to music that had always fueled him. He knew that success could be fleeting, and recognition was meaningful only if it was paired with authenticity and dedication. Every performance, whether in a tiny hall or a large theater, required the same heart, the same care, and the same honesty that had brought him this far. One day, he was invited to perform at a prestigious event where professionals and music enthusiasts from all over the country would gather. It was the biggest stage he had faced yet, and the pressure was immense. He spent weeks preparing, carefully planning each piece, practicing tirelessly, and refining his compositions. He experimented with new techniques, blending traditional melodies with innovative rhythms, aiming to create a performance that would be unforgettable. The challenge was daunting, but it also filled him with a sense of purpose. The day of the performance arrived, and the theater was filled with people eager to witness his music. As he stepped onto the stage, he felt the familiar mix of excitement and nervousness. The audience was diverse, young and old, critics and enthusiasts, skeptics and supporters. He took a deep breath and reminded himself of everything he had overcome. The years of practice, the moments of doubt, the resistance he had faced, all of it had prepared him for this moment. He began to play. The music flowed naturally, each note carrying the essence of his journey. The audience listened intently, some leaning forward in fascination, others closing their eyes to fully absorb the sound. He could feel the connection forming, an invisible bond that transcended words and language. For the first time, he truly understood the transformative power of music. It could touch hearts, shift emotions, and create a shared experience that no other medium could achieve. As the performance progressed, he noticed subtle reactions from the audience. A few people whispered softly, amazed by his skill and the depth of emotion in his playing. Others were visibly moved, some wiping tears from their eyes. The critics who had initially seemed indifferent were now fully engaged, their expressions softening, their attention fixed on every movement and note. The music had transcended skepticism and doubt, leaving only wonder and appreciation. There were moments when he stumbled slightly, a misstep in timing or a small technical error, but he did not falter. Instead, he adapted, letting the music guide him, trusting in his instincts and experience. The audience never noticed the mistakes. They only felt the continuity and sincerity of his performance. In that moment, he realized that music was not about perfection. It was about honesty, expression, and connection. Each note mattered because it carried a piece of his heart and soul. By the time he reached the final pieces, the energy in the theater was electric. People clapped along. Some stood in anticipation. Others swayed to the rhythm of the melodies. The music carried the story of his life. The struggles, the perseverance, the victories, and the unwavering passion that had driven him from the small room in his neighborhood to this grand stage. It was a story without words, yet it spoke more clearly than any speech could. When the last note faded, a powerful silence hung in the air, followed by an eruption of applause, cheers, and standing ovations. The audience was on its feet, clapping, shouting, and whistling in appreciation. The young musician felt a surge of emotions, joy, relief, gratitude, and a profound sense of accomplishment. He had faced every challenge and fear, and now he had proven, not only to the world but to himself, that his voice could not be silenced. After the performance, many people approached him to express admiration and to offer opportunities. Some wanted to collaborate, others asked him to perform in different cities and countries. Invitations for teaching, mentorship, and workshops arrived, allowing him to share his knowledge and inspire others. Yet, despite all the attention, he remained humble. He remembered the struggles, the doubts, and the moments when others tried to silence him. Those memories kept him grounded and reminded him of the journey that had brought him to this point. He continued to teach young musicians in his community, sharing not just techniques but the lessons he had learned about perseverance, passion, and authenticity. Watching his students discover their own voices brought him immense joy. He encouraged them to embrace their uniqueness, to practice with dedication, and to never let fear or skepticism stop them from following their dreams. The room became a space of inspiration, creativity, and connection, reflecting the very values that had guided him throughout his journey. Traveling and performing also became a way for him to learn continuously. Each audience, each venue, and each interaction taught him something new about music, life, and people. He experimented with new compositions, blending styles, and exploring themes that reflected his experiences. His music evolved, growing richer and more complex, yet it always retained the honesty and emotion that had defined it from the beginning. Through all of this, he remained aware of the obstacles that could appear at any time. Critics, skeptics, and naysayers were still present in the world, ready to challenge or doubt him. But he had learned to embrace challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats. Each performance, each new experience, was a chance to prove that passion, dedication, and authenticity could overcome opposition and connect with others in meaningful ways. He often reflected on the journey from the small room where he first practiced on makeshift instruments to the grand stages he now performed on. The struggles, resistance, and moments of doubt had shaped him into the musician and person he had become. He realized that success was not measured solely by recognition or applause, but by the courage to remain true to oneself, the ability to touch hearts, and the perseverance to continue despite obstacles. Late at night, in quiet moments after performances, he would play alone in his room. The music flowed freely, carrying the stories of his past, the victories of the present, and the hopes for the future. Each note was a reminder of the journey, the obstacles overcome, and the power of passion and dedication. It was in these private moments that he felt the deepest connection to his art, the clarity of purpose, and the fulfillment of expressing himself fully. He also began to mentor young musicians beyond his immediate community, offering guidance through workshops, online sessions, and collaborations. His experiences taught him that inspiration could travel far, crossing boundaries and cultures through the universal language of music. Each student he guided, each audience he moved, became part of the legacy he was building. A legacy rooted in resilience, courage, and the refusal to be silenced. As he looked toward the future, he knew that the journey would continue to present challenges. There would be bigger stages, new audiences, and moments of doubt. Yet he also knew that every challenge was an opportunity to grow, every audience a chance to connect, and every note a chance to express the truth of his heart. Music had become not just his passion, but his purpose, his voice, and his way of shaping the world around him. In the quiet hours, as he played, he allowed himself to dream, to imagine the possibilities that lay ahead. Each melody was a step forward, each rhythm a reminder of perseverance, and each audience a testament to the power of authenticity. He had learned that the world might try to silence those who dare to be different, but the courage to follow one's heart, the dedication to one's craft, and the passion to connect with others could create a force that no doubt, fear, or opposition could ever overcome. The journey of the young musician was far from over, but he faced it with confidence, hope, and a deep understanding of the power of music. He knew that every challenge was an opportunity, every performance a chance to inspire, and every note a step toward a future where his voice would continue to be heard. The applause of past audiences, the admiration of supporters, and the connection with listeners all fueled his determination to continue. He had discovered that the true essence of music was not just in playing notes, but in sharing a piece of oneself, touching lives, and inspiring others to follow their dreams. And with this knowledge, he would continue to play, to create, and to amaze the world one performance at a time.